Welcome to Galactic Grandmother, Heart to Heart. My name is April, and my special guest today is RAE DOVE. RAE is an artist. She's an NDE and ET experiencer. She is an author. She's written a couple of ebooks, one of which is called Transported to Telos. And that is how I found her, because I was doing research for my series on Telos, and she has an interesting experience. So welcome, RAE.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You have an interesting background, which seems to be a family lineage of extraterrestrial contact. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
A little bit. This is something I didn't find out till I was actually involved in ET contact and having those experiences. Back when I first started having ET experiences, I kept it a secret from my family because it was considered taboo back then, which was just 10, 15 years ago. But now it's much more open and it's okay. But at one point, decided because I felt like I was living two lives inside me, one with ET contact and one with this great big secret, that I had to, so to speak, come out of the closet of the UFO contact. So I call it the UFO closet. And I did that by creating a coloring book for children and adults, and I named it Galactic Friends. It was pictures of ET contact, ETs, so that adults and children can get used to looking at non-humans. I had a bunch printed out and brought them to different family members and handed them the book and said, here. And at one point, my children, which are adults now, brought them in one room together and said, hey, I need to talk to you guys about something. And I told them about this experience I had, which started my ET contact, although it did start earlier as a child, some conditioning experiences. But the main experiences was in 2013 when I was ill and knocking at death's door, and I was taken on board a ship and medically healed. I was keeping this a secret too. So I told them about that. And I was actually shocked that they went with it. They said, well, we know you and you never lie and you're always honest. And they believed me. And I was shocked that they believed me. Next, it was time to tell my parents. Well, it turns out that one parent, my mother, she passed on recently, so I can say this. But before she passed on, I told her about the ET contact. She told me that while she was carrying me, while she was pregnant with me, that she would often have dreams of spaceships landing in her front yard. And it frightened her so much that she never spoke of it again until I was in my 50s and I was outside with my father and we were watching a weather balloon that didn't seem like it belonged over the house. And as I was looking at with binoculars, because it looked like a military hot air balloon, weather balloon with devices and instruments on it, suddenly a big, bright, whitish orb, probably about 3 to 5 feet in diameter, came flying to the weather device and was buzzing around it like this, like a bee would. And I said to my dad, I said, do you see this? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? He goes, oh yeah, I'm seeing it. And it's not from this world. Now, my dad has background in aerospace. So he knows about things that are human made and non-human made. And he later even mentioned when he was a teen, some vague dreams or experiences with ETs. So there was this background that I didn't know till later, until I came out of the UFO closet. So this was a background that I did have. And I've heard that a lot of people do have a background that have ET contact experiences now, that their family has a background in it. And I never, ever thought any other member of my family had, and I was the exception. I'm like, why am I having these experiences? My family doesn't have this experiences. Well, it turned out they did a long time ago.
The thing that's nice is now that you brought it out into the open, because these ET contacts do seem to follow family DNA. If your children have any experiences, they'll feel free to come to you and talk to you about it now.
Yes, and this has actually happened when there'd be something on the news and they will not talk about it, ignore it, not believe it exists, and something happens on the news or something happens to them and they see something. Guess who the first person they call is?
So do you believe that the ET healing that you had, do you think that that actually opened up your consciousness to a certain frequency that made you in resonance with more contact? of non-human types? Or do you think that a long time ago when you had your near-death experience and you left your body, do you think that that may have opened up some psychic abilities in you that allowed you to be aware of things?
It was both and in steps. And that's what I call conditioning. A lot of people with ET contact experience and ET communications have had conditioning, even though they didn't know that's what it was. And so this was one of the first steps to conditioning of it. A lot of my conditioning too was spiritual experiences, even from childhood. I would see things and feel things that others didn't. And when I talk about it, I was looked at like, you're weird. So if I learned to be quiet about it and not tell anybody about it, I was silent. But yeah, you're exactly right. Every time you have a profound experience, whether it's spiritual or ET contact, although a lot of ET contact is of a spiritual nature, it opens up something. It expands your consciousness, and your consciousness may expand and become more aware, and then it goes back down. Then you have another experiences and it stretches again, and then doesn't go down as far. It's a process.
What initiated your interest in becoming involved in the CE5 group?
I think just following what excites me, what my passion is. I've always been very intuitive and very connected with myself. You got to follow your heart and your intuition. And so that's what I do. So it was just one thing led to another. And I had been meditating for 25 years prior to all this with a self-realization fellowship. I followed Paramahansa Yogananda, took all the lessons, did all the practices. I never, ever thought that that would lead to this. I never made the connection. There was great conflict when I was healed by ETs. Conflict was that I have this Roman Catholic religious upbringing that I would later put aside and follow the teachings of Paramahansa and Yogananda. And then that leads to ET contact. When I was at my deathbed praying for help, instead of being sent an angel or Jesus, I was sent an ET. So that was the conflict. And the conflict arose from my upbringing, that which I had previously been conditioned, that which I was taught. And in the Catholic religion, it's changing now, but it always was that if you have such experiences, especially with ETs, it's the work of the devil.
You mentioned that you're very spiritual. I think that goes hand in hand, not just your frequency of energy is just in a higher space, which puts you in resonance with telepathic communication with higher beings of light, which will include our star families.
And that's the key to anyone that wants to learn ET contact or have these experiences, to raise your frequency, raise your vibration. That's the secret.
Is going within to find out your own true divine nature.
Yes. There's a saying that you can't make ET contact until you've made contact with yourself first.
Love it. So you've been on a lot of different treks with your ET group. You've been out to Joshua Tree, and that you had an experience where you had communicated with insectoid. Did you call it an ant person?
Yes, that's what I intuitively felt, that they were the legendary ant people of the Hopi Indian stories.
Yeah, so I was just fascinated with so many of your experiences that you've had. And from there, also, you've had Sasquatch experiences.
Yes, that's the most recent this past year.
And that sounds very exciting. I'd like to.
That was a strange turn. It was as strange as going from this Catholic religion to suddenly seeing ETs. That's how strange it was to go from ET contact to Sasquatch, or the Bigfoot people. And again, if I go back in my history, I must have been in my late 30s. I did have an experience of what seemed like a Sasquatch was watching me at the Oregon caves. And then years and years and years went by, nothing. And then something brought me back to the Oregon caves. And I'm like, I wonder if Sasquatch people are really a thing. How could I even ask that of myself when I'm communicating with extraterrestrials? Why would that be strange? But for me, it was strange. But this was Sasquatch, and something in my heart kept pulling me back to it. So one day I came across one of Dara Inca's videos, one that channels Bashar. And oddly, every single video interview I watched of Bashar being channeled, I could agree with everything he was saying. It was from prior experiences that were similar. Just, probably 99% of what he was saying I had experienced. So I thought, oh, wow. And what he was saying on this one was talking about the Sasquatch and their history, and then the history of humans, and how we are all created from Sasquatch, which was the early hominid ape-like creatures, were manipulated in their DNA with extraterrestrial DNA to create the human. And it just resonated with me. And I thought, are they really real? I wonder. So I decided to just research it and then go out into the field alone and try to have communication with Sasquatch people. And it was successful, and it was a profound experience. So yes, I do believe in the Sasquatch people. And yeah, and it kind of behooves me that the extraterrestrial or ET contact community does not connect the dots with the Sasquatch community, because they're two huge Facebook communities or communities in social media, where you have the ET contact people, you have the Sasquatch believers, the ET believers. They should get together, because what I found out was that Sasquatch, because they are so highly telepathic with other abilities, that they are in contact with the ETs and they are helping each other. They are working together. So thus, these two Facebook groups should be doing the same thing, because I have seen Sasquatch people, believers, posting that, yeah, I don't know if ETs exist. And then you have the opposite, where the ET people are going, I don't know if Sasquatch exist. Like,
Oh,
connect
boy.
the dots.
Right, right. So, do you live by a wooded area where you would assume that Sasquatch are more readily available?
I'm in Southern California, hour outside Los Angeles, and there are oak tree wooded areas near me. But there had been no Sasquatch sightings in my area, except for about 30 miles away. There was a couple back in the 70s, I believe. But I based it on this theory that the Sasquatch people would either contact me, if it was successful, telepathically, and it didn't matter where I am, because it's
Right.
just telepathic. I mean, that's what I was expecting. But what happened was that a portal, I believe, opened, and there was a spaceship involved overhead. And they did appear to my space, although I don't believe they were fully 100% in this dimension. They had slipped partly into this third going on fourth dimension density. So they were there, and I did get a photograph, but the photograph was a photograph of his face and shoulders kind of merged into the foliage. So
Oh,
one would say that, oh, you're just seeing things. A lot of people will say that, but when it comes together with feeling the energy and hearing them and the message that they were giving me, I know what I was seeing.
I do believe that they're interdimensional and telepathic, so they can appear or not appear. And I've seen videos of people that have had a lot of connection with them. What was this message that you received? Was it a personal message or a message for everyone?
It was a message for everyone. I asked them specifically if they had a message, not for myself, but for humanity. And the message was very soulful and really touched me. It had me choking up and near tears. And it made me think of history, where the Native Americans were, their land was taken.
Mm-hmm.
They were pushed out, and it wasn't even their land. They were a part of the land. They are the caretakers.
Right.
And they believed the land belonged to everybody. And what happened to them is what has happened to the Sasquatch people. And they are very sad. And the Sasquatch people are one being that are extremely emotional, very strong emotions, high emotions, not in the sense that they're raging and angry. It's the opposite of that. It's the deep, soulful, heartful emotions that are, I guess, the opposite of anger. They're beautiful emotions, but that's what it was. They are so affected by this, and they want humans to accept them as another race here on planet, just as there are other races on the planet that have been here longer than humans. such as the ant people as well. That was basically their message. And you can see the full message on one of my YouTube videos on my channel if you're more interested.
Oh, I will. I will. Yes. Ray, with your background, with your frequency of being, I think that makes you in resonance with higher consciousness beings, such as extraterrestrials, Sasquatch, ant people, so forth. You went with one of your groups to Mount Shasta, California, which is
Yes.
one of my favorite spots that I love to frequent. And you had an interesting experience up there as well. Could you tell us about it?
Back after my experience of being healed and then having the strong interest to research everything I could about UFOs and ETs, I kind of wound into or falling into a CE5. It's called CE5 ET contact groups, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And they're groups of people that get together and they go out at night, sometimes a weekend, and they raise their vibration. We raise our vibration in different methods, and each group does their own methods for raising your vibration. There's many different methods. And by raising our vibration, we are making ourselves open and more sensitive to telepathic communication or other experiences of the non-ordinary. And so I did CE5 for years, working with a group that's in San Diego. So I would drive down to San Diego and we'd go up in the mountains over San Diego and do our contact groups there. And then that same group, we went to Joshua Tree. And that's where I had that experience with the ant people. And then that led to a sudden interest via an interview I saw with Enrique Villanueva. And he is associated with Peruvian or Spanish speaking ET contact group. He does the Mission Rama ET contact group. So I thought, wow. And I was really drawn to the Mission Rama ET contact group because it was a different type of ET contact. Instead of being focused more on watching the skies with the CE5 groups, and you'd still have experiences that were down on the ground or within with ET contact, but it was more focused on pulling in crafts, the visual. Mm-hmm. The Rama group was different in that it was more of bringing you inward and developing your other senses, your psychic senses. And thus the experiences were a little bit different. And I was more drawn to that. So just by chance, I saw this thing where Enrique was going to have a ET contact group up in Shasta for English speakers speaking. And I think he probably had the first English speaking contact group for Rama. Previously, you could only go to these groups and get not as much because if you don't speak Spanish, it's too hard to figure out what's going on or to receive the message. So he was forming this ET contact Rama mission group for English speaking people and explaining what Rama is and how to do this and the different techniques. And I thought, this is perfect. So that was in 2016. So I drove up there and amazing things happened. Now thinking about Telos. But consecutively for 5 years in a row, every year we'd go up there in August and do this Rama group, which was combined with CE5ers. So you can imagine the energy. You've got these two groups, one strong with this and one strong with the other. And we were having such amazing experiences. Even through COVID, we were up there. It was amazing. Even when the fires were going on up there, we somehow made it through the smoke and held one in there. And we would always camp about halfway up the mountain. I think we were at about 7,000 feet and the mountain is 14,000 feet. I haven't been there for 2 or 3 years. The last year I was there in 1922, 22 is when I was taken into Telos with that experience. The year before that, I had an experience where I was kind of introduced to Telos because I didn't even know what Telos is. Here I am going to Mount Shasta every year and I don't even know what the Crystal City is or what Telos is. No one ever really mentioned it. As I was leaving in 21, everyone's packing up the truck. We were last people on the mountain to leave. And I suddenly had to use the restroom. Well, the outhouse was way down the hill. And I thought, well, I'll just go over there. And I start walking over there and I tell everyone, I'll be right back. And I was going to be like, 3 minutes. And as I was walking away, I forgot that I needed to use the restroom. I thought, that's weird. And I suddenly, like a bolt of lightning, I'm going to go make contact. That was just the thought. You're going to go make contact. And I'm like, what? So I just followed my heart. I was being open and I started walking away from the camp that we were closing out. And I was only about probably 40 feet away. And I just stood there going, And I put my hands out to feel energy so that I knew where to go, because you can feel energy through your hands. And I turned and I thought, okay, I feel energy this way and it's feeling cold. So I followed that way. And then I look down and I see what I describe as a fairy path. And this path was about 12 inches wide and it was deep curved, like people had been walking through it a long time, or a lot of animals going down this path, but it was outlined, kind of scattered with purple flowers, like a fairy path. And I can get a little childlike inside sometimes. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't know where I'm supposed to meet anybody, but this path is really cool. So I thought I'm just going to go follow it, even completely forgetting that there's people over by the truck waiting for me so they can leave. So I walked probably about 30 feet down this path, and it led to this little plateau about 1 foot up of a square area that the flowers were around the square. I'm not kidding. That's what I saw. And so I stepped on the platform and just stood in the middle. And this is cool, completely forgetting about ET contact. And then I suddenly decided to turn and face the mountaintop where you could see the top of the mountain through the trees, up. I faced the top of Mount Shasta. And that's when I experienced this tingling kind of electric energy coming through my feet and going up my body and just kind of freezing me. I mean, it wasn't painful. It was just subtle electricity just coming right up my body from the ground. And I kind of froze. And then the space I was in, it started to get cloudy with little star floaters here and there, like it was raining slightly, little stars, little tiny, tiny, like specks of dust. And when I looked out to the rest of the forest, it suddenly became like I was looking through a window, looking inside, looking out of a window that was wavy like water. So I was in some kind of I don't want to say force field, but energy field. I don't think it was a portal because I didn't go anywhere.
Okay.
I was still there. I was planted. My feet were planted into the ground, and I did not go anywhere through all this. But what happened next was I started to look up, and I don't know how far it was in feet. I mean, I should know, I'm an artist calculating space. I would say it was probably about 50, 75 feet up. There was like a platform, like there was a ship above me, and there was this platform, and there were people standing on it, kind of looking down at me. And they weren't dressed in blue jeans or hiking outfits. They were wearing robes, white and gold robes. I don't know how many there were, maybe 4 or 5. And the one in the middle that was the tallest, he at one point started talking to me. And when he spoke to me, it was very personal. And I had 2 messages. And usually when I talk to the Telosians, as I call them, I get 2 messages. One is personal, meant for me and my own growth. And the other is meant for humanity. It's always that way. So I got a personal message. And the other message that he gave me just really baffles me to this day. But what he said was, not now, but someday people will come in droves to Mount Shasta for energy and energy work. That's what he said. And then there was some kind of a download going on, then a motorcycle coming from the distance that kind of snapped me out of it. And then the curtain of energy around me dissipated. And I went back to the truck, and they're going, "Where were you? You've been gone for 20 minutes. It felt like 10 minutes, 5 minutes. And I was going to tell him, I go, yeah, I was, never mind. So that was my first experience in 21, where I learned about Telos. And then I kind of thought, okay, weird. Maybe they're, and I didn't still associate them with Telosians, because you don't, when you get information, you don't immediately associate it with anything else. You have to have more experiences. So the next year being up there, I had another experiences, and that connected the dots. And that was when I was taken out of my tent in probably some kind of a portal, the tent filled with a mist, like a dry mist. It wasn't cold or anything, just filled with a mist. I felt energy going from my feet all the way up my body. And I kind of rolled into this like ball of light and energy and was transported into Telos. And that's where I had a really profound experience speaking to what she referred to herself as something like the mother of the mountain translation. The combined energy or Apu of the mountain, the combined beautiful energy of Mother Nature and the energy of the mountain being the mother of the mountain. And I've heard stories of other people meeting the same woman who represents like a grandmother or mother of the mountain in Telos, but they had another name for her. But that's the name that I got from her telepathically. And again, when I was there, I ended into a crystal city lined with crystals. It was beautiful. Felt like I was there in flesh. All my energy had been raised to the point where I don't believe I was in the third dimension inside the city. I was more in a higher dimension, probably high fourth or fifth. I'm only guessing or guesstimation that it was like a fifth dimensional. And it was very real. It wasn't a dream. It was real. The whole experience was real. And that's when I decided that, yep, Telos is real.
Now, did you see the city itself at all?
I was only in what I would describe as a huge hallway with crystal wall dividers. And I was in one room. And the dividers you could see through as you see people walking by, and there was doorways. Think of it as like if you would imagine a hall or like a great hall of records where it's a huge space, crystal walls. There's no ceiling, only light. The flooring was with a shiny, very shiny white, but those crystal walls were just mesmerizing because inside the crystal walls, it looked like they were little sparkles of like LED lights. And I'm sure they weren't LED, but that's what I could reference it to. And what got me to that point, and I want to talk about the crystals, is that crystals hold energy, they hold records. That day or evening before I was taken, during the day, everyone had gone to at the camp. I think there was probably 40, 50 people there. Most of them had gone to a lake because that's a lot of the work we do is to experience nature, because when you're in nature, it raises your vibration. So a lot of our activities are towards that, where you're doing meditation, chanting, just different energy work group stuff. And one of that is people like to go to a lake. Everyone had gone to the lake to go swimming except for 2 or 3 people that stayed in the camp. And that's what's great about these camps with the Rama groups and the CE5. You can do what you need to do to raise your energy, even if it's doing something else that the other people aren't doing as a group. I've always been a loner, not lonely, but a loner. That's how I prefer to live. And so I stayed back from the water. And so I started going for a little hike around the camp, not too far off. I was always in sight of where the camp was so I wouldn't get lost in the forest. But I just started walking around and playing by meaning I suddenly felt childlike, where I'd be jumping over sticks and talking to the birds and talking to the chipmunks and just experiencing the sun and discovering little treasures here and there. I was just having a great time and playing like a child in the forest. And with that childlike heart, I went back to my tent and I decided to create an an offering to the mountain with gratitude. And you do that by fashioning natural organic materials. And I had brought in a raw crystal from my house. For some reason, I had just grabbed it and stuck it in my bag. So I made a little Apu offering next to my tent, and it consisted of white sticks that were in the shape of a triangle. And inside it, I put some green leafy moss that I found and a shell that I had also brought from home. And I dropped the crystal in the shell. I didn't know till later that crystal had a connection somehow with its vibration and increase the vibration with the connection in the mountain with the Telosians in their crystal city.
That makes sense to me.
Yes. So it made sense too that when I was brought into Telos, it was that crystal multiplied 1,000,000 times as a kind of a saying, the crystals. And to this day, I surround myself with crystals. And it always brings me back to the energy in Mount Shasta and the people that live there and work there for this planet. So I did not see the city. I did not see other things that people talked about that I've read about. And interestingly enough, that night, it was at 3:30 that I was taken. A tent next to me, they spoke later and said that right around that time, they had this vivid dream of walking down a hallway that was lined with crystals and little lights inside.
Oh.
So the energy affected this person's dream. That's how strong the energies are there.
So you had an afternoon by yourself and
Mm-hmm.
made this offering, gratitude, and then you went and settled into your tent for the night. And then
Mm-hmm.
what happened?
At some point, I fell asleep. And then I heard a weird sound outside that woke me out of my sleep. And I listened. And usually at night, when you're camping, if you're not familiar with camping, hear forest creatures at night, be little bugs making noise. There might be a night animal walking around and crunching leaves. There'll be an owl hooting, or just there's, and if the wind is blowing, you'll hear the trees rustling. Well, when I woke up to this, like a clay bell being hit, like clack, 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 and that woke me up. But what was weird about it was that when I listened for more noises, because it kind of like, what is that weird sound? I wasn't really afraid. I'm very familiar with camping. I've camped all my life. But what struck me as strange was that there was no other forest creatures. It just went silent. There was nothing. And I still didn't hear anything. And that's when all of a sudden energy started at my feet and went up slowly to my head. And then I had the experience when I was transported to this city. And I only spoke with one person, and that was this lady of the mountain. And she didn't speak my language. She was speaking another language, and I didn't understand her. And I spoke with her not verbally, but telepathically. It was, well, not to say telepathically, it was telepathically. So if you mix empathy or empathic ability with telepathic ability, you get a more multidimensional meaning of what you're hearing or feeling. And so this was a telepathic communication with her. And even though it was telepathically, I don't know why or the significance of this was, but she wasn't speaking English. And I'm like going, oh no, such a great opportunity to speak to this lady, and she's not speaking my language. And the minute I thought that, it was translated to English, complete with pictures and stuff and feelings and everything. Yeah. And this too was one of those experiences where you think it's only 10 minutes, but turns out it's like been twice that length by the time you come back. I think all in all, I felt like 10 minutes, but when I look at my clock, it was like a 30-minute experience of stuff going on. So I was there in Telos for about 30 minutes. When you're in that kind of high vibrational energy for that long in their presence, it affects you for days after that, where you just feel so much love and energy. And everywhere you look, your senses are heightened, and you don't need to speak. You don't need to hear someone say something. You already know what they're going to say. It's just beautiful, which is another reason for all of us to just work on raising our vibrations. And what can help us with that is crystals. I mean, it's not some woo-woo stuff. There's some real energy there. Even the tiniest little crystal put by your pillow at night is going to help.
When you were in that hallway with the crystal-filled walls,
Yeah, they were like wall partitions, probably about seven, 7 to 8 feet tall,
what
and solid crystal. You could see through them, but they were like the kind of crystals where you see the clusters. They were clusters.
was there a purpose to you being transported there? Was there a message for you? You said that very often you get a message, personal message, and a message for humanity.
Yes, the main message to me was all around the subject of self-confidence and trusting my intuition. The message to people, when I wrote my book, Transported to Telos, I have in the back section the full message that was given for humanity. And I don't know how I remembered it, but it was almost like a download, because when I was ready to write the book, it just started flowing. I knew what the message was still. It was still there. A lot of times when we get downloads, it could be another experience that triggers some of the download to come out.
Right.
And so it needed to come out. So I wrote it down. And when you write it down, it's released, right? Maybe to make more room. I don't know. The message to humanity was something a Native American or indigenous person would say about humanity and what they're doing to the land, that the waterways especially need to be kept clean and they're getting too polluted. It was about that. It was also about unity, and it made a metaphor. The message was a metaphor in a way about the top of Mount Shasta in Panther Meadows. There is a what called a wellspring, and the Native American peoples there have been recently, in the past few years, granted the right officially to help keep this area clean and protect it. It's in their hands, which is wonderful. But this wellspring just bubbles up. Maybe it's from the melting snow in the mountain, but water's coming out of it. Clear, beautiful water. Because it's so sacred, you cannot drink from it at the source. You've got to go downstream a ways, and then you may partake of the water. And by the way, I did that, and the water is so sweet. It's like the water you get from a bottle of water or the tap water. It's almost disgusting compared to this wellspring water, just pure mountain water with no chemicals in it. This water, in metaphor, trickles down through the meadow, and then it meets another river and breaks into some waterfalls. I think in the town below Mount Shasta, there's a town called McLeod, and there's waterfalls there. And it breaks into those. And then that river from McLeod goes into the Sacramento River, and the Sacramento River pours into the ocean. And the ocean touches all surfaces of every continent. In this way, we're all connected. And for people to realize this, it needs to be done, because that's the reality of how humanity and the world works. There's no such thing in reality of division. And when certain political factions are creating division in people and division in property, so to speak, it's going against reality. It's an illusion. Divisions are illusions. The true reality is that everything is connected. There are no divisions. That's an illusion. And this is part of what the message is that humanity needs to see this and feel it and learn it, that there's just so many illusions and delusions, that it's all about unity. And that's what the Telosians' message was. This person's Mother of the Mountains message was that not only keep your waterways clean, of course, everything that trickles down is collected into the big grand ocean. And if we see and feel those connections, we're becoming a better human race.
Exactly. When we really get in touch with our inner self, that's when we realize that we are connected to everyone. We're a fractal of the whole.
Yes, exactly.
A drop that's part of the ocean. So interesting. I want to thank you for your time and all of your wisdom and all of your stories that you've shared with us. And I'd love to get you on again. I think we could come up with some great topics to dive into deeper.
Yes. And thank you.
We will talk again, I'm sure. Many blessings.
Okay. Thank you.